British Columbia this year in the Kinwin Lottery for the physically disabled. There's $100,000 first prize, and for the first time in Canada, a daily draw. You can win $100 every day, Monday through Friday, from April 2nd to June 29th. Kinwin is the Good Times Lottery. Kinwin means good times for you and better times for the physically disabled of British Columbia.
Today's winner, Mrs. Violet Diana in North Vancouver.
British Columbia Television.
See that man there? He is Jean-Claude Parrot, national leader of C.U.P.W, a man who faces a 3-month jail sentence for defying the back-to-work order passed by Parliament for the 23,000 members of his union. And we'll be questioning Mr. Parrot on what's liable to happen to his union and perhaps even in his appeal, because he's out on bail right now, first off the top this morning. Also in the studio we have an incredible inventor. His name is Ted Tilby. Now you know I've been doing programs alleging political interference from the Liberals in the magical sugar machine invented by Ted Tilby. And this machine, everyone agrees, can revolutionize the sugarcane industry of the world. What you're going to see now, actually, is part of his invention being handled by Hawker Siddeley in British Columbia. Hawker Siddeley and Huntington, the Tory MP, and others are afraid that political interference will prevent the development of this industry in British Columbia. The Liberals deny it, of course. Ted Tilby is here this morning, though, to tell us when he invented it, why he invented it, what he says it cost the Canadian taxpayer, because I've got figures of $20 to $25 million, and it should be interesting, I'll tell you. On top of that this morning, as if I didn't have enough on my plate, we must take another little bite at this benighted federal election. And we're going to go to Vancouver South this morning. And you've got 3 beauties from Vancouver South. Clarke, the Tory, Manning, the Liberal, Quadra. Linda, why did you let me say Vancouver South? Vancouver-Quadra. Bill Clarke, the Tory. I'm confused. You're confused. Manning, the Liberal, and Bush, the NDP. But first, to Jean-Claude Parrot after this break. Straight interview in Jean-Claude.
There is some general footage of workers.
You don't need it.
Don't need it.
Just bumpers.
Just bumpers. Right.
We've always got to have pictures. You're here. You're the man I'm going to talk to.
That's right.
Frank Walden was the regional director.
National director for the Western region.
National director for the Western region.
Yeah. We keep the word national in our union, not regional.
When Chief Justice Gregory Evans of the Ontario Supreme Court sentenced Jean-Claude Parrot, the national leader of the Postal Union, to 3 months in jail for defying Parliament the other day, he said of you, Jean-Claude Parrot, that you are a dedicated union leader, but his judgment, your judgment, was warped in this instance. Tell me, are you arguing the facts of what you did or merely the legal interpretation of how you should have been dealt with in court?
Well, we are appealing the case, so obviously we disagree with certain things that have happened there. We disagree with on question of jurisdiction, question of law, and we're appealing those cases.
Do you feel bitter about it?
Better? No, not really, except, like I said at the trial, when the judge asked me the question, all this did not resolve all the problems in the post office. All this is obviously what I call a political move from the government to attack our union because they felt it was a popular move to do at the present time. But the problems are still there, and I still hope for the 23 million Canadians in this country, including the 23,000 postal workers, that one day there will be a real inquiry in that whole administration of the post office, why there is so much a poor labor management relation, why poor financial administration, why a poor postal service, even when there is no strike.
Is none of this the fault of the C.U.P.W? You at least have national unity in your union, because you seem to operate on a fairly unified basis, but is none of this the fault of C.U.P.W?
No, we deny to have any part on the reason why there is so bad labor management relation and so bad postal service. And to support our say, it's no more our union saying it. There is at least 30 reports, studies of all kinds that came out that said that management is responsible for the mess that exists in the post office, and surely something must be done about it. And we wonder why the government in the last 10 years that they got in front of them all those reports saying what to do about the post office, didn't do anything, refused any Royal Commission of Inquiry. What do they have to hide? We don't know.
Will it become a crown corporation regardless of which government wins, which party wins?
You know, they make promises during an election. After that, you don't know what they're going to do. So that's what happened last time with the wage control. So this time they came just before an election last year, thinking they were going to call an election and announced they were going to make the post office a crown corporation. They didn't call the election. Now they're calling the election, and they didn't even find the time to pass that bill before the election. So obviously it's another election.
But the back to work order, you were
Yeah.
specifically convicted of counselling, of telling members, or of not telling members to go back to work. Is that correct?
I asked the members to maintain their legal right to strike they have obtained after 18 months of negotiations. You see, under the law, 2 years before, we had to inform the Public Service Staff Relation Board whether we were going to choose the road of conciliation with the right to strike or compulsory arbitration. 2 years after having followed all the legal obligation under the law, the Parliament adopted legislation after 1 day strike saying that what you decided under the law 2 years ago is no more valid. We're going to impose on you now compulsory arbitration.
But looking at it dispassionately, Parliament can do what it likes. I mean, the facts you give me are correct, that they gave you the choice of arbitration or strike, and you took the right to strike. When you struck, though, they passed a new law saying, don't strike, go back to work.
Correct, but that's true, they can do what they like. If the RCMP opened the mail illegally, they say we're going to pass a law to make it legal. But if postal workers go and strike legally, then they pass a law to make it illegal. Sure, they can do what they like, but it doesn't mean it's right.
Dennis McDermott, I don't know how close you are to Dennis. Is he a political friend of yours, Dennis McDermott of the CLC?
We're not enemy as such, but we surely have differences of opinion.
He said that union members must not overreact against the 3-month sentence which faces you, and that they should not storm the barricades, but vote against the Liberals. Do you agree entirely with what he says?
Well, up to a point, yes. Up to a point, we agree that the membership should not have a reaction that will not be proper at this moment. But at the same time, we do not forget in our union, and I think a lot of people in the labor movement are the same, that despite there is an election going on right now, there's still people that have to fight against their employers, that still have to go on strike, that still have to try to achieve a collective agreement. Their rights are still being attacked. And those people should not be forget because there is an election campaign. And my concern, and it seems that there is too much player wanted to play moderate to show how reasonable they are and forget about the people they represent. But I hope that it's only until May 22nd, and after May 22nd that the labor movement will really take on their responsibility and support the people that are fighting.
Right now, I mean, let's be quite political about it. You've got 23,000 members in Canada, and you've got a good few thousand in British Columbia.
Yes.
How do you want them to vote in the May 22 election? For which party does Jean-Claude Parrot say vote?
Well, Jean-Claude Parrot himself will vote for the INDP. But what we're saying definitely that the reason is that's the only party, as far as we're concerned, got certain policies that are interesting for the people in this country, and at the same time, the other two do not have these policies, but have shown in the past how they can attack the rights of the people. Because let's not forget that what the Liberal government did in attacking the rights of the people in this country, whether it's the right of privacy, the right to decent employment, the right to well, there's a lot of other rights. We're supported by the Conservative all the time in the House of Commons. So obviously the two are on the same ground right now.
When do you appear on your appeal in the Ontario Supreme Court?
I don't know yet, and I will not be there probably myself because I have to report back to jail the day before.
You've been in jail already?
I was in jail for 26 hours already.
Nice experience.
Yeah, I even work in the laundry. And I could tell you in jail at least there is window. There's none in the post office now in the new plans. There's no individual work measurement there.
Windows in the jails, but no windows in the new post offices, says Jean-Claude Parrot, experienced, albeit in a minor way, in both establishments. More with Jean-Claude Parrot after this break.
Yeah.
Jesus, the Canadians slaughtered.
Oh,
Did you see the game the other night?
No, I was at the rally during the game. I saw the beginning of it.
Well, the beginning of the Rangers came on like
Yeah,
gangbusters.
two,
Oh,
nothing.
two
And then, well, I saw almost all the first periods.
Tell them to throw up the phones. Jim, Fred, tell them to throw up the phones. Just throw them up, just in case we get some good calls quickly. Jean-Claude Parrot, postal workers, C.U.P.W. You face a 3-month sentence.
Yeah.
What are the terms of your bail? Did they place any restrictions on what you can say, do, or go?
No, well, there's two conditions. The first one that I go back to jail the day before the appeal, and the other one that I do not encourage the membership to get involved in illegal strike, which is normal under the law anyway.
So there have been no wildcat stoppages since you were sentenced?
No.
No. And you don't want to see any during this period of waiting for the Ontario Supreme Court?
Exactly.
Did you give me a date for the hearing yet? No.
No, they didn't give a date for the hearing. They have to wait, I think, for the transcript and then find dates where everyone is available and where the court is sitting. So.
Supposing they'd said to you, you can get out on bail, but you can't talk politics or talk about conditions in the post office, what would you have done?
Well, when it's an attack on freedom of rights, I would have stayed in jail.
You would have stayed in jail. Okay, let's talk about the post office for a minute. You know, I said to you, are you the only, is it only the government and the administration that's to blame? How many grievances have you got against the post office now?
Well, when we signed the collective agreement with Bryce McKessie in 1975, we felt we had a good
Bryce who?
Bryce McKessie.
Oh, the chairman of Air Canada.
Yeah.
Got a nice job now, hasn't he?
Yeah, very nice. Well,
He was defeated, wasn't he?
Yes,
The Liberal.
and we were very pleased. When we signed the collective agreement anyway, since then, the post office refused to honor that collective agreement. It gave rise to over 65,000 grievances now. And grievances that we are winning, you know, it's not, Postmaster General Lamontagne said, oh, it's easy to file grievances, they are frivolous grievances and things like that. We got 65,000 across the country. Thousands of them being referred to adjudication. We win our cases before third parties. We even, and when we won, they appeal it before the federal court because it's the taxpayer money, so they don't mind to go that road, which you don't see too much in the private sector. They even go to Supreme Court. We got a recent case that have occurred that cost $2 million to the Post Office Department to
Fight. To fight. $2 million cost $2 million.
$2 million that they have to pay back our members for because they didn't ask them to work the additional hours prior to the casual employees. And the collective agreement was very clear there, and they violated that collective agreement during that until the decision came out from Supreme Court.
Oh, by the way, I should mention that Frank Walden, your national director and the Western Region director,
Yeah,
he faced much the same charge as you, but it was thrown out of court the other day, wasn't it?
exactly.
Because apparently it wasn't. He wasn't within the jurisdiction at the time of the alleged
that's,
offence.
That's right. He was in Ontario when the offence occurred, and he was charged in BC, so they said that.
So he was acquitted. Now, back to that $2 million. You laid a grievance that casuals were being asked to work overtime before permanent employees.
Exactly.
And you took that to the grievance
To
procedure.
the grievance procedure. They denied it all the way long. We won. We referred it to in front of a third party. Third party said the union was right. They continued to violate the collective agreement, referred it to federal court. The federal court said that the union was right. They continued to violate the collective agreement. They went to Supreme Court, and in Supreme Court, Mr. Clarke, who is the Deputy Postmaster General, to justify his appeal to Supreme Court to obtain the right to be heard, didn't put it on the legal interpretation of the collective agreement, but said it will cost $2 million to the post office if the Supreme Court sustained the case.
Has that been decided yet in the Supreme Court?
The Supreme Court told Mr. Clarke that they will not even heard the case. It was obvious they were wrong, and
And you
Now-
quote that to me as a kind of classic example of deliberate obstruction by Lamontane's people.
Definitely. In fact, if you go back to our case, the grievances we won before a third party are all in issue that we won during our 42-day strike in 1975, and it's all cases that the employer, in the last round of negotiation, when we decided to go on strike on last October, that they were trying to take away from us, from our collective agreement. And as a matter of fact, there's a couple of things that were taken away by the compulsory arbitration that was imposed on us.
Well, let's talk about Lamontagne. We've had a whole raft of postmaster generals. We could probably name 6 if we tried in the past 10 years. What about Lamontagne? Is he fooled by the officials? Does he not know what is happening? Because you make a case that they are deliberately obstructionist.
Definitely, I think he's the worst we ever had, personally. I think he was appointed by the cabinet to do a natural job on our union, period, not to do anything about resolving the problems in the post office. The minute he was appointed, we met him for a few hours, explaining to him what was happening. We gave him all the reports that came out in the last 10 years. We gave him a lot of information. We told him what we were trying to do, what can be done to help and all that. And suddenly he just took the line of attacking the union continuously, attacking our demands wrongly, the demands of the membership. So a lot of threats. So finally, no problems have been resolved. And this is Nothing have been resolved. As a matter of fact, we see the struggle continue, and it will continue because as much for postal workers than for the public. If nothing is being done, the post office will continue to lose any type of efficiency they were having in the past.
You make a very good, logical, sound case, and I'm willing to believe the worst of the postal administration. But your union still has a bad image. Why is that? Why do people kind of resent C.U.P.W? Is it a media conspiracy to make you look bad?
Well, there is no doubt there is a real attack on us on the basis trying to show we're a bunch of radicals, anarchists, whatever it is. But I just ask a question. Last fall, 23,000 people across this country, spread in over 1,000 postal installations, offices where there is 5 or 6 members, like in Univik, Northwest Territory, or local like Toronto, where you got 5,000 members. You know, how can you think that those 23,000 people accepted to maintain their right to strike despite the legislation, their right to picket line despite the injunction, and because they didn't feel they have a good case? And I think it's obvious that those people felt they were right, and they believe that they are getting an unfair attack by the Post Office Department, Treasury Board, and
You
the
say the
government.
union is solid.
Well, we got national unity in our union. We don't have to campaign for that.
Trudeau says the land is strong and must be unified under the Liberals. You say C.U.P.W is unified in both languages.
Exactly, despite the attack of Bryce McKessie to try to divide us on racism in the past.
He tried that in the past.
Gee. When I divide the Toronto members against the Montreal members,
Oh, yeah,
it was
the
going
group.
on the field, and
Isn't Montreal jammed with militant radicals who are very difficult, according to the McKessie theory?
we are militant, and militant means we are, do not mean being irresponsible. It means that we are very active, we participate, and don't forget we got a lot of people in our union that participate in the activities of their union. We got over 3,000 people that hold a position in the union at one point or another. So it shows that we're very active, no doubt.
Okay, it's not funny, but when you were in for 26 hours waiting for your bail,
Yeah.
you did what? You worked in the...
Just for a couple of hours, they get me to work in the laundry. Well, I told them, and we agree, both sides, I was not going to get any special treatment in jail, so except I was in the minimum security area with a lot of others.
You may be militant, but they don't regard you as violent or dangerous.
I don't think they do.
Well, anyway, you could lose the appeal and go to jail for 3 months. Will it have been worth it?
Yes, I believe it.
But you're confident you'll win the appeal?
Well, I am confident.
At least you must say so.
I'm always optimistic.
Jean-Claude Parrot, thank you very much indeed. National leader of C.U.P.W. Webster and the magic sugarcane machine next. Complicated story, but a good one. After this break. Ted Tilby, now living in Victoria, is a magnificent inventor. Before we get into the complications, describe to me your basic invention and what it would do to the sugar cane industry, especially in underprivileged countries throughout the world.
Well, basically, my system is completely revolutionary. It bears no resemblance to conventional milling. Conventional milling, you simply take the cane and crush it, squeeze the juice out of it, and clarify the juice and make sugar out of it. And that's it. You have three products. You have sugar, bagasse, and molasses. With my system, I split the cane and only take the inside, the very clean portion, the inside of the cane out, and that then is squeezed or diffused, and juice is extracted from it, and that's the sugar making process, or alcohol. Or you can leave the sugar in and make animal feed. After the sugar is extracted, you can use it for fuel, and that gives you sufficient fuel to run the entire system without having to burn oil or anything like that.
And you on and on and on with fiberboard,
yes.
plasterboard, byproducts, lumber, anything you want to name. Now, I want to throw in one of the complications. Your machine, which you, a man called Miller, invented in 1963, I am told has so far, despite its magnificent potential, has so far cost the Canadian taxpayer 20-odd, and private investors, some $20-odd million. Would you agree with these figures?
I'm not able to comment on the 20 million. I've heard anything from 20 million to 100 million thrown around, Jack, but I can tell you the part that was spent on research and development, mechanical research and development, because I was in charge of that.
Government money?
I can tell you the government money and the private money. Yes.
How much?
The total of the private investors was in the order of $150,000.
Now, at that time, too, the patents got in a bit of a tangle, did they not?
No, not way back they didn't.
Finally, did that operation go bankrupt?
I assigned my patents to a company called Canadian Cane Equipment Limited on the understanding that if they were unable or unwilling for any reason to not pursue the patents, they would revert to me, subject only to the PATE program.
And did they revert to you?
They did not.
Who got them?
Nobody got them. They just simply stayed in limbo. The federal government had a hold on them, or thought they did, or it was necessary to go to court to get them back.
Now, the patents are now in the hands, are they not, of the Canadian Patent Development Corporation Limited?
Canadian Patent and Development Limited, yes.
Canadian Patent Development Limited.
The rights are, not the patents.
The rights to use them. And these rights were put up to bid.
No, they weren't. They were simply certain select manufacturers or engineering companies were asked to say how long it would take them to put the thing on the market.
But Alcan was asked if they were interested in taking it up. Yes. Hawker Siddeley were asked.
Yes.
Arvid were asked.
Yes.
And the people who paid $100,000 for certain of the rights were Hawker Siddeley in the Fraser Valley here, right?
That's right.
Now, as of this moment, we'll leave some of the complications out. This vastly magnificent potential machine is being partly manufactured under license or rights in British Columbia, right?
It's supposed to, yes.
Hawker Siddeley.
They're supposed to be doing it, yes.
They have the rights for what processes?
The sugar making end only, as far as I understand from C.P.W.
Sugar making and fiberboard.
Yes.
And who has the other rights?
The animal feed only rests at the moment with Arvid.
Why were the rights for this machine, which is acknowledged to be a magnificent technological development, split into two groups?
I have no idea. That was the most ridiculous thing that was ever done, because it is absolutely unsplittable. It's exactly the same machine. What you're really doing is taking exactly the same machine and telling some people in the world that they can use it for this purpose and not for that. And it's absolutely unenforceable, and there's no way it could ever be enforceable.
Are you aware of the political controversy raised by Ron Huntington, the Tory MP, among others, that efforts are being made by Liberal Party interests in the East, centred in Windsor, to take away from Hawker Siddeley their rights to produce machines and jobs and to selling force in British Columbia, and give them all to a much smaller, less skilled company in Windsor, Ontario?
I'm very much aware of that because I'm very, very close to it. And I can tell you from my personal experience that this political intrigue business is absolute, utter nonsense. And also I can tell you that the firm in Windsor, Ontario is anything but less competent.
That's Arvid.
Arvid is a very, very competent
firm. Have they built
indeed.
any machines?
Indeed they have.
Are they operating anywhere in the world?
Yes, they are.
Where?
Several countries in Central and South America. They have this, the only ones they're allowed to make, by the way, are the animal feed ones. If it weren't for that, they would have sugar making machines operating in various parts of the world. They've been asked to produce the machines. They have the machines. They were able to demonstrate them, but they've been disallowed to do so by Mr. Mel Hill.
Of Canadian Patent Development Limited.
Yes, and the point I want to make is that one year after these patents were put out for this 1 year option, Arvid was in a position to sell machines, and Hawker Siddeley were not, and they were disallowed from doing so. So the result is that both myself and the Canadian government are being deprived of royalties.
But you can see my interest in this. If Hawker Siddeley, big multinational but with good Canadian roots, if they were given all of the thing, could they not do a better job than Arvid?
Well, they're certainly in a position with the sugar end, Jack. That's the big end. They're certainly in a position to have done much better than they did.
What do you say about liberal lobbying?
I think it's absolute
Lobbying
nonsense.
of liberal interests in Windsor. Perhaps you asked people to lobby to get the. Have you made any moves to get the contracts taken away from Hawker Siddeley?
I certainly have. The point is.
You have?
Yes. The thing that I was the one that. The reason I can tell you that there's no political intrigue whatsoever is because I wrote to Canadian Patent Development on at least 6 occasions. I have a whole file of letters that I wrote to Canadian Patent Development expressing my legitimate concerns that my patents were not being developed and they're rapidly expiring. You must remember that every month that goes by on a patent is a month you'll never see again. It's a finite life on these things.
You're in a strange but perhaps a good position in this. You are the inventor.
Yes.
You will get from anything Hawker Siddeley sells, and so will the investors, and the Canadian taxpayer will get some money back if it's a big success. You will get a royalty on everything they sell.
Yes, I do.
Will you also get a royalty on everything Arvid sells in Windsor?
Yes, eventually.
And you're obviously not a shareholder in Hawker Siddeley, are you? A shareholder in Arvid?
Yes, I was made. They gave me 5% of the shares after the 1 year option had expired, and I felt I was a free agent. You must remember that I undertook with C.P.W to act as consultant to both firms for 1 year, because I was assured before I assigned my patents over to Canadian Patent Development, and I mean really assured, that in 1 year this thing would be on the market, which was perfectly feasible to do, was ready to go on the market and would be sold in 1 year from that date, and I would start collecting royalties.
Have you collected any royalties yet?
No, I have not.
Because all this
nothing's been
public
sold.
money's got to be repaid too, hasn't it?
No, not. That's not the part. The part is that the C.P.W and I were arranged to split the fee. You see, so that's not the point. The point is that Hawker Siddeley have had above their 1 year option. They've had another 2.5 years, and they still have not got a machine on the market.
Well, they say they've got a machine producing in Barbados way above the hourly run, which was the basis for their, performance.
Well, according to CETA and according to Mr. Horner and according to many other experts who have been down, this just simply isn't true.
Ted Tilby, the inventor of the magic sugar machine. I don't know if I've got the story across to you clearly, but next I'm going to show you a little bit of Mr. Tilby's film. You saw the Hawker Siddeley one off the top. And he'll tell you what it can do, and you can see the pictures after the break.
You can't show that. Okay.
You can't stand up.
Better have the slides in there.
Yeah. You two gossiping again this morning?
You want to show
No.
me?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Will it won't.
You want to take some of the shots of some of these?
Leave that there for the
Hold
moment.
up, you see. Okay. How are you going to get into that
The
film?
belly
Jack?
button showing.
How are you going to get into the film? Off the top. Do you want me to give you a count, or are you just going to give them a guide?
Can I just comment on that film so you know what it is, Jack?
You'll do the comment on the
No,
film.
but I mean, I'd like to tell you in advance.
Yeah.
This is strictly inside the Arvid shop, nothing outside the shop at all. This is a research and development shop where they're building these.
Where is he going to see this? Where is he going to? I need that monitor quickly.
Yeah.
We need the monitor
Turn
quickly.
the monitor around, please. Okay, RG, bring it up to here, please. Okay, how long do you want for intro to it?
30 seconds.
30 seconds off.
Ted Tilby is the inventor. Nobody argues about that. Of the magic sugar machine which can revolutionize the sugarcane industry and produces all kinds of things. What are we going to see now, Ted? This is your film, made where?
It wasn't really my film. It's made by Intercane Systems in Windsor, Ontario, inside of their development plant. Where
Is that the Arvid company?
Yes, it is.
With the man Radjic, is it?
He's the president.
He's the president of it. When was this film taken?
Oh, several weeks ago.
Several weeks ago. Okay, I want you to describe to me what we see. What's that?
That's just simply, that first part was the comfits coming out from the middle of the cane after it's been through the separator. These are simply billets.
Is that sugar that was coming out? No, pith.
That's the pith. The sugar is contained in
What's
the pith.
that?
This is their experimental machine they have set up where they can interchange parts and move them around so they can do experimenting. You see it coming out of there. He's running at about 40 tons an hour there.
This is all instead of the natives in these tropical countries hacking about with the big
Well,
saws.
they still hack about, Jack. This takes the place of the mills. Now, there you see the inside of the cane coming out.
And what's made from that inside of the cane?
That's the sugar is leached from that. We'll show you a machine a little later on that squeezes the juice from that stuff, and then the balance of it is used for fuel after the sugar is taken out.
Methanol, you mean?
Yeah, this is the extractor. This is one of my other patents. It's a revolutionary rotary extractor. You can see looks like a big aspirin tablet coming out of there.
What's that?
That's dewatered pith after the juice is taken out. This machine automatically takes the pith out of the juice, and it's.
And what do you do with the dewatered bit?
The dewatered stuff is burned in the furnaces for fuel. Now, this machine is absolutely revolutionary. You see how small it is. It takes the place of a very, very large diffuser, and it's absolutely revolutionary.
Only Arvid makes that machine.
It's my
does it?
own invention. I've assigned to them. Yes, they developed this thing. They built that right in their shop.
This is not covered by the Canadian Patent Development Limited.
No, they don't own this one, but the rights to this one. But the point I want to make is I invented this machine, and Arvid built that, as you see it there. That's a very complicated and delightful machine.
And you're trying to impress the point that while you'll concede that Hawker Siddeley is a large, well-financed and technically skilled operation, that Arvid is not that bad in comparison. Is that the point?
I would tell you that the Arvid machine tool, from my own personal experience, is probably one of the most sophisticated machine shops in Canada.
Well, it seems, should we see any more of this? What's coming next?
This is the juice. You probably just see juice coming out here shortly.
I don't see the juice.
There, you see it there. It's just being squeezed out of these various stages. There it is.
And
That's the speed it comes out at. This is 40 tons an hour.
What is that juice used for?
That's the way they make sugar from. They boil that down and make sugar,
Make
or
sugar.
alcohol.
All right, put a camera on me, will you, here? Enough of that for the moment. What's this?
That is a core panel made from sugarcane rind strips. Now, this is the reason the rind must be shredded into these matchstick-sized pieces.
Looks like a big Wheaties.
It does. It's I built a house from that in 1967-8.
That's a plasterboard.
No, that's a particle board made
Particle board.
from rind segments also, in a slightly different form.
That,
Now, that is my patented cane lumber. I have a patent on that machine as well.
separate patent.
Yeah, separate patent again.
Nothing
yes.
to do with the present kerfuffle.
No. It's I would say that one is the most important patent I have next to the separator itself.
You deserve a lot of commendation, and you're an incredible fellow, even if you have, in the process along the way, a lot of taxpayers' money has gone into it. It's not your fault that was it your fault the patents got all fouled up so that CPDL had to step back in and try and clean it up?
I don't think it was, Jack. My responsibility, I was director of Canadian Cane Technical Development, and I was operating out of a very, very small plant in Edmonton. And the head office of Canadian Cane was in Montreal. Now, the money that was spent by Canadian Cane, of that money spent, I spent $1.05 on actual research and development, on mechanical research and development. The rest was spent on overhead and pre-sales or whatever goes on in companies. But the decisions to spend money were made in Montreal, not by me.
That was the company that went bankrupt.
That's right.
But who recognized the potential which caused CPDL and the government really to step in?
Well, it wasn't that they stepped in. I was maintaining these patents myself personally. People try to give the impression, particularly Canadian Patent Development, that they are the big rescuers. This thing was going to go down the drain if it wasn't for them.
That's
this
the
is
clear
absolutely
impression
not true.
I have.
It's definitely not true. I was keeping the patents alive through a friend of mine at my own expense. I did this for many, many months. Then Industry, Trade and Commerce came to me and said they're going to take over the payments. They made one payment, and as suddenly as they started, they stopped.
Because it was an illegal payment. They weren't
Maybe,
allowed to
I don't
make that
know what the reasons were, but the point is that I had these payments being made regularly.
But you were grateful, I've no doubt, when CPDL came in, recovered the patents legally. What upsets you is the fact that CPDL made a misjudgment in splitting your three basic operations into two bidders.
Now let's back up a little bit. Canadian Patent Development came to me and negotiated with me for me to assign my patents to them. It isn't that they just took them over. I assigned my patents to them, and they asked me to, and I did, because I thought it was an excellent opportunity to get these things on the market, and it should have been. But I found
who's to blame? 1963, you made your first real foray into this invention.
Mm-hmm.
Your major patents were finished by what time?
Oh, the major one, 69.
1969. Here we are in 1979.
I've had 4 since then.
4 different ones,
Yeah.
which you haven't given to them.
No.
No, but that's 10 years now.
Yeah.
This potentially machine worth a $200 million industry to Canada, I'm told,
It's at least that, yes.
and worth many millions to you in royalties.
Indeed.
It's still being messed around.
Yes.
Who's messing it around?
Well, as far as I'm concerned right now, the biggest problem is Canadian Patent and Development Limited.
What do you want them to do?
I want them to license 2 Canadian firms to compete to my entire technology. I'm not trying to take it away from Hawker Siddeley necessarily, although they deserve to lose it as far as I'm concerned. They're 2.5 years late. I was told by Mel Hill in no uncertain terms that this thing would be on the market in 1 year. And there's a report I have here from C.G.E. Downing, Dean of Agricultural Engineering at Guelph University for many, many years. He made this report for CETA in 1969-70. At that point, he said that the machine operated, he saw it, my machine, operating at 40 tons per hour on a continuous basis. And this report is available to anybody who wants to read it. This is in 1969-70.
No, I can't get into that because I don't see them. But what you're saying to me, as the inventor, and you certainly have a major status in the whole kerfuffle, you say that C.P.W, the people who reorganized the patent rights, shall grant that, and from whom Hawker Siddeley for 100,000 bought certain rights.
Yes.
Harvard didn't have to pay for their rights, did
Yes, they did.
They paid too. Okay, fair enough. You're saying that if the politicians were half awake, they would give the total rights to 2 competing Canadian firms.
Absolutely.
How long would it take to get this show off the ground in that case?
At the time this report was written, you could have got it off the ground. I told, CPDL asked me how long it should take, and I told them 6 months. They said, well, let's give them a year.
How many jobs would this create over the years in British Columbia and in Windsor?
It would, you shouldn't just say Windsor, Jack. Intercane has full intentions of building a plant in Vancouver. They have to serve the Pacific Rim countries. Vancouver is an all-year-round port. This is a logical place
You're
for them to be.
prepared that this Intercane, of which you're a 5% shareholder, would compete from here with Hawker Siddeley?
Absolutely.
Would they be prepared to do that?
Delighted.
Hawker Siddeley?
I don't know whether Hawker Siddeley will, but Arvid has been told Mel Hill many times they'd be delighted to compete with Hawker Siddeley or anybody else. They're a wholly owned Canadian company and a very dynamic one.
Just so I don't lose track of my political position, which is right in the middle, non-partisan, and absolutely this and that.
Such as mine is too.
Set up the interview which Bob Ireland did for me with, what's his name? Jack Horner, the guy that Stanfield gave a bad time to on the program yesterday. And I want to see Bob Ireland's, I asked Bob to ask these questions of Jack Horner based on the allegations made. Are we ready for that now?
Not yet, just stretch. I'll let you know.
Go to break and come back with a Jack Horner interview. Yeah. Have you got it now?
Yeah, I got it.
Somebody tell me. Bob Ireland of BCTV News Hour asking my questions to Jack Horner, Industry, Trade and Commerce Minister, on allegations of political interference in the sugar machine.
Mr. Horner, Ron Huntington alleges that political interference by Liberal lobbyists from Windsor, Ontario could endanger development of a major secondary industry in BC, that being Canadian Car, which has part of the patents for a device for revolutionizing the sugar cane industry. Can you comment on that allegation?
Ron Huntington is merely making political talk. He obviously doesn't know much about what he's talking about. You know, I know that case inside out and upside down. I've gone over to Barbados to look at the machine and looked at the one in Windsor. There's no danger of jeopardizing Canada Car in Vancouver whatsoever.
Is there any pressure, and if so, from where, to take the rights away for this project from Hawker Siddeley to give them to the firm in Windsor?
There's no pressure whatsoever to take the rights away from the firm here in Vancouver. There's a question as to whether or not there can be 2 people manufacturing a similar machine. We've got Ford, they tell me, manufacturing an automobile, and General Motors and Chrysler, and then there's a whole bunch out in the world too. Seem to have 2 manufacturers, and there's 2 manufacturers of farm machinery. Do you think there'll only be 1 manufacturer of a board making machine? Sugarcane board making machine? No, I don't.
Are there any plans on the part of the federal government to interfere with the management of the Canadian Patent Development Corporation and give all the rights to the Eastern firm to export this product?
Canadian Patents Development Limited is not a Crown corporation. It's an agency operating in my department. And I want you and anybody else to know I run my department. And if I don't, then I want to find out who is.
Would you then allow any interference on behalf of the Windsor interests in this case?
Would I allow any interference? I want my department to treat Canadian business fairly. And if it isn't treating Canadian business fairly, then I better make certain.
So, to the best of your knowledge, there should be no interference with the Hawker-Siddeley
There
plan?
is no political interference from Windsor. Gonna bother me one bit. I've done a world of good for that city. I've got this year committed to be expended in Windsor $1.1 billion in the automobile industry through my ministry of handling the auto pact. $1.1 billion to be spent in Windsor. They can't come to me with any political pressure whatsoever, can they, after that?
I may have misunderstood you a minute ago, and did you say that there may not be sufficient market for two companies to...
No, I asked you the question. Did you think there would only be one manufacturer? General Motors thought there would only be one car manufacturer, but the Japanese found out how to make a car. And, you know, I was in Korea, and they're making an automobile. And so I expect that if this sugar cane board takes off, that other people will be able to make a machine too. So that Canada Car has got to be competitive with its patent, with its machine. If it isn't, you know, it won't have the market. If it is competitive, it will have the market, isn't it? Isn't that the way it goes? I think so.
One more segment with Ted Tilby, just so we understand the situation, because it could mean a lot of jobs here after this break.
On the energy from biomass, my machines are the key to this whole thing. You can use them throughout the United States.
15 seconds coming back. Yeah.
Dr. Lipinski said you'll need at least 3,000 of these machines at $10 million a copy.
Are you... Ted Tilby invented these machines. Canadian Patent Development Limited recovered the patents after a lot of money went into it and there were trouble financially here and there, correct? I've got that right. There's no arguing about that. Now there are two firms, one in Windsor and one in British Columbia. Your solution, as I get it, is to give both firms full rights to these machines and let them compete.
Exactly as was recommended in the Pete Marwick report, which Jack Horner ordered.
Well, why
Independent report.
Why hasn't Horner taken the step and said, okay, each of you will have full rights. Let's see you compete. Because as it is now, Arvid only has the right to produce the cattle feed.
Right.
And Hawker-Siddeley have the right to produce the fiberboard and the sugar bit, right? Why doesn't Horner act?
It appears to me, Jack, that Horner evidently, and people like him, who are elected by the people, don't have any control over the presence of Crown corporations. It seems like they cannot do anything.
Or maybe their own deputy ministers and civil servants.
I think you'll probably find that's where it is, the deputy minister level.
You're the man who lobbied Horner, not the liberal. Although maybe you're a big shot liberal.
No, I'm not. I'm a lifelong conservative. I've been a conservative all my life. It has nothing to do with the political parties whatsoever, except that I am a conservative.
So we can understand the concept of this. You say that we know that from this machine you can get fuel, you can get all these byproducts, which instead of merely being a sugar crop would become a vast industry for all of these tropical countries.
Yes.
Are you on a President's Committee in the United States?
Yes, indeed I am.
Which one?
It's the Select Committee for the Program of Energy from Biomass, which is an alternate fuel source which would virtually eliminate the necessity to import oil if it's put into full...
100 years down the road?
No, no, no.
Biomass meaning biological mass.
Yes.
Such as sugar cane or...
Sweet sorghum is the basis of it in the United States. It'll grow anywhere corn will grow. And it runs through my machines just the same as
and
cane
can produce
does.
the same byproducts?
Precisely.
Precisely. What are the Americans going to do? Oh, will the Americans have to use Canadian patents?
Indeed. That's why I'm on the committee. My machines are the cornerstone of the whole program.
And they recognize the patents?
Yes, indeed.
Is it not possible, though, was there not some kind of unseemly little mention somewhere, either in the W5 program or perhaps in one of my earlier programs, that there was a danger of outside entrepreneurs stealing the Canadian patents and producing their own machines outside of the royalty areas, the patent areas?
Absolutely not, Jack. The only possible problem we have here is if people keep dragging their feet, such as the Hawker Siddeley CPDL Axis are doing, my patents will expire and then the whole world can use them. We'll get no benefit from them whatsoever.
Mind you, Hawker Siddeley told me they're very enthusiastic about it and they want to get it cracking.
It may be, but they're certainly, nobody can tell me they couldn't have done what Arvid did in the first year. I was consulting to both these firms, and there was no doubt in my mind that they were not working to their full capability or anything close to it. They were not treating these things seriously for the first 8 months of that year.
Have you collected any royalties at all yet?
No,
Not a nickel?
no.
You're making a little bit of money by working for Arvid, I presume.
When I consult with them, I do, yes.
You consult with them. In your spare time, you're
Spare
not.
time?
You were trained as an architect, right?
I was, yes.
And what do you do in Victoria?
I am a portrait painter.
You're a man of many parts.
Yes, I like to keep life interesting.
Well, you'll get no political decisions on this. Are you going to lobby whatever government is in power to give the total patents which are available under CPDL to each of the two willing parties?
Certainly, there's nothing I'd like to see better, and it'd be the best thing for Canada. The Pete Marwick report should be implemented. That was an independent report instigated by Jack Horner on my behalf, and it should certainly be enforced immediately.
How many jobs, I mean, if this is half as good as people think it is, how many jobs will this produce for Canada?
Oh, thousands. I mean, there's no doubt about that, Jack. Make thousands and thousands of jobs for Canada.
And
Thousands.
eventually, if I'm right on the figure of 20 to 25 million put in by the Canadian government, ITC, C.U.P.W, who are well known for pouring money into things, if this makes money, we'll get our money back, we the taxpayer?
In very, very short order. But could I just speak to that for 1 second?
Right.
The money that went in through ITC with PATE programs is available to any business. There's no doubt about that. What CETA did is completely out of my control. They could spend money anywhere in the world without even talking to me, which they did. Any money that CETA spent was not under my direction. Had nothing to do with me whatsoever.
Where can I see these machines operating in the world today, even in partial form? Hawker Siddeley has one in Barbados.
The system you see in Barbados was designed by me. All Hawker Siddeley did is put the separator itself under the equipment that already existed. They were supposed to build the whole thing, but they didn't have to. They got it given to them by CETA.
They paid $100,000 for the rights.
For the rights, but this has nothing to do with the machinery.
Okay, Barbados, I can see the Hawker Siddeley one. Where is the Arvid one?
The best place to see the Arvid one right now is they have several hundred tons of cane on hand in a big cooler they built for the purpose. See it in Windsor.
In Windsor. And what about international inquiries?
I'd direct them to both companies if you wish, but Lipinski from the United States Energy from Biomass invited Hawker Siddeley and Arvid to put on a display. And Hawker Siddeley were unable or unwilling to do so, so Arvid did.
That was in the United States recently?
Yes.
Where?
In Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. Ted Tilby, I'm glad to have met you. I hope this mess gets straightened up and that it produces jobs on food and building materials for much of the world.
Thank you very much, sir.
My thanks to Ted Tilby from Victoria. Webster, next to politicians, but they're nice guys this morning. They'll be bright, informed, not elusive, they'll be direct, and they'll make you change your vote to one of the three parties. Let me get the writing right this time. Vancouver-Quadra. Bill Clarke, the Tory, Paul Manning, the Lib, and Mr. Bush, the NDP. After this break. It's not long till the federal election, May 22, which I see as next Tuesday. And one of the key, yes, of course, they're all key ridings, is Vancouver-Quadra, where Bill Clarke, the Tory, has been the MP now for...
7 years, Jack.
7 years. 7 years in the right house with the wrong party.
Well, we'll change that this time.
Okay, Bill, are you a big success? What have you done for the riding, and do you think you'll win?
Yes, I think we'll win, and I've given them good representation in Ottawa for 7 years now. Communication, that's the name of the game.
You're totally confident?
Yes, no doubt about that.
Paul Manning, a man who's been around politics a long while and has been hanging around for how long waiting for for his party to call this election?
I was nominated December 5th, 1977.
1977. Not before elected to any government office.
Never.
Held a number of key government jobs, such as?
Oh, with Mr. Basford at Consumer Affairs, with the Prime Minister, with the Deputy Minister at Trade and Commerce, with Mr. Basford at Justice, Habitat.
You're what you might say an Ottawa clone of some kind.
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't. How old are you, Paul?
34.
Don't I remember you when you were doing honest work as a newspaper reporter?
That was some time ago, back in the late 60s.
In Vancouver Province.
Vancouver Province.
Alan Bush, we haven't met before, Alan.
Yes, we have.
Oh, do forgive me.
I was going to say I'm so glad to be back on your show, Jack.
When was the last time?
About 25 years ago when you were running City Mike.
And why were you on the program?
I was operating a youth program out in Dunbar for about 300 or 400 young people, and there was a young lady by the name of Sybil Connery that used to
Save
work.
the Children Fund.
Yes, and
Now,
she introduced me to you.
And what became of you during that 25 years which caused you to run for the NDP?
Well, I went up north to the Peace River country after I met you, and then I was operating a church there for about 8 years.
You're a minister?
Yes, yes. And
Still a minister?
yes. And after operating the church for 8 years, I spent little time studying politics because I was unhappy with what was happening to a good many people in the Peace River, and I ended up in the NDP. I used to be a Tory, but I'm very glad to say that I changed my stripe.
First time run for federal government?
No, I ran in 1965 against Jed Baldwin
Where was that?
in Peace River.
Peace River. You
Yes.
got slaughtered.
Well, I didn't exactly get slaughtered. We increased the vote 400%.
And
That's
it
not
was
a slaughter.
What was your majority the last time?
3,500, Jack.
Is he right?
That's a margin, I guess. you call it.
3,500 margin?
I think 3-4-3-4.
3-4-3-4. Well, gentlemen, you candidates don't matter anymore. Would you agree with that broad statement?
No.
Would you agree with it?
No, I think we're quite important, Jack.
Is it not a fact, gentlemen, and I ask you to join in a discussion on this without specific questioning, that the election has now boiled down to ignore the candidates except in very small type or in television shots and vote for the leader, vote for the president? Is that not the message the people of Canada are being given, to vote for the president, be it Broadbent, Clarke or Trudeau? And is this not highly undesirable?
I think
the
that's...
accent's certainly being taken off the team. You never see any of the ministers or any of the critics around now. It's all leaders, you're right.
Is this good or bad?
I think it's bad.
What do you think?
I'd love to have the people in Quadra vote on the man in the riding, but I think a lot of it's a response on our side to the kind of ad campaigns the Tories are running. If their campaign seems directed towards an anti-Trudeau vote, and I think we respond by being positive about the Prime Minister.
And very negative about Joe Clarke. In fact, I doubt if I've heard such personal abuse being hurled in a campaign almost by all sides. I wouldn't like to pin
I don't
it
know
down
if,
one.
I don't know, to be fair, Jack, as far as it's personal, I think it's more on policy. I mean, we had, I think of the Tory ad with the Prime Minister standing up there and the litany of things run behind it, and I mean, we're not doing stuff like that. We had pictures of Joe Clarke falling off picnic benches and running into bayonets, and we don't use that kind of stuff. We...
You mean instead the Prime Minister, who's been kind of low level for a long time, comes on now and says, Joe Clarke is mentally, and he uses another word, it didn't mean mental defective, but he kind of left the impression. You know what I mean?
I know, but you can tell how much trouble he's in, Jack, because all he can do is attack Joe Clarke. He hasn't put forward any policies, and Joe Clarke's been the one that's putting forward the positive policies this campaign.
And while you're sitting there so smugly, let me tell you that the average man on the street, which is me, Mr. Broadbent...
You think you're the average man in the street, Jack?
Mr. Broadbent comes across like the chairman of the Junior Chamber of Commerce, talking about we need new resource policies and we didn't need a new industrial strategy. What is his industrial strategy? Can you tell me?
Can I tell you? Basically, it's to see that Canadian resources are developed in Canada and processed more in Canada, and that we get on to manufacturing things in Canada.
That means buy out the Yanks and the British and the Dutch and whatnot, does it?
Oh, I don't think that's necessary in a lot of cases. I think we just have to give Canadian enterprise some sort of a push and some sort of a faith behind it that he's going to let it go somewhere.
But you'd concede it certainly means
We just saw-
nationalize the resources
No.
in terms of the oil industry.
No, not at all.
Aren't you socialists anymore?
Oh, yes, we're socialists, all right. But we also believe in a mixed economy, which means that if somebody's doing a job for the prosperity of the total country, then you don't interfere with that. But if nobody is prepared to do that, then the government can certainly get involved. I think our just recent segment indicates exactly what happens to Canadian initiative and Canadian development. The segment you had with our inventor about the sugarcane machine.
What a botch up
Constant botch-up, constant botch-up. And that's what we have from the Liberal government, and that's, I think, what we get from the Tory government as
I
well.
wouldn't get it from NDP government.
I don't think we would.
Paul?
That's
What?
why I left the Tories there.
You went from right to left in one hurdle.
It wasn't very difficult.
No, there's not really much difference between you and Bill Clarke anyway, is there?
There
In
really
philosophy.
isn't. There really isn't.
Name a difference, Paul.
Well, I think we've got an approach towards Quebec that's a little more
Oh, yeah.
comprehensive. I think that we've...
There I am guilty of
Petrocan,
treason again. I
sure.
forgot to mention national
Almost
unity.
almost treason.
Almost treasonable.
treasonable.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about national unity.
All right.
Well, I think that one of the things the Tories are trying to say is separatism has risen under a Trudeau government.
Here, here.
Conveniently forgetting the fact that
I think that's
when
true.
Bourassa ran in 1971 in the province of Quebec against separatism, he got 102 out of 110 seats. The aftermath may have seen Bourassa run a bad government and the Olympics not go as well as possible and Levesque come up the middle, not talking about separatism in the next election. But I still think that it's our policies, if you want, or what we've done in the last 10 years that has us in the ballgame in beating Levesque and bringing this country together.
Doesn't Mr. Trudeau give the clear partisan impression that if you're not a liberal, you're against national unity?
No, I don't think so. I think what he's trying to say is that Joe Clarke talks about a team, and at the same time 15 of his key candidates in Quebec are disassociating themselves from the leader.
Well, I can't see that since he was on the television with them yesterday. Joe Clarke was at a giant rally in the Montreal area. But it is a fact that we are much worse now in the national unity status than we were 11 years ago when Pierre Trudeau came to power, and one must only ask why. And I say it's the confrontationist policies of Trudeau the man and the Joe Clarke's a consulter, and he won't go and confront with these people. He'll go and, I can't say negotiate, Jack, anymore.
No,
that's a bad word.
It's a bad word, isn't
but
it?
consultation is the word. And Joe's indicated that he can go down there and talk to Rennie. And Trudeau says, well, if Quebec leaves, I'm going to stay in Quebec. So how can he be a nationalist when he's going to leave Canada if Quebec leaves? I mean, that's, I ask you.
Balderdash.
Is that not
Well,
an exact
It sure is
quote?
balderdash.
Well, listening to all this about Canadian unity and whatnot, I think Mr. Trudeau is certainly very concerned about Canadian unity, and I think Mr. Clarke is very concerned about Canadian unity. We seem to often get into an argument about who loves the country most or has most faith in Canada. We hear a lot about that and a lot of word slinging back and forth between the two major parties. Maybe I shouldn't call them the major parties anymore. But really, we're not going to have much unity in this country until we have some economic justice coming out of Ottawa. And we certainly don't have that. I'm shocked to see Mr. Trudeau in a speech recently talking about the fact that the Quebec textile industry has 100% employment right now. They're running at 100% capacity. The thing that he omits to tell us is that, in fact, the textile industry in Quebec is about 75% of what it used to be, and there's still hundreds of thousands of people unemployed there.
Yeah, but
and in fact,
probably
it was during a Liberal administration that they allowed the textile industry to be practically shut down because it was to the benefit of certain corporations in Canada to get their stuff
I don't go
elsewhere.
door knocking, but I go telephone knocking. And I'll tell you what happened when the tariff rates, the quotas were imposed on importers to British Columbia. The price of runners went from $2.95 to goodness knows what not.
Well, we have corporations taking advantage of that.
No, we suffer because of the fact that we can't import the cheap stuff from the Pacific Rim now.
No, we suffer.
And,
We're going to suffer even more, according to the
Would it be
president.
treason to say, let's have the cheap stuff from the Pacific Rim, from Korea and Taiwan, to bring down the cost, even if it puts a few Quebecers out of work? Would that be treason?
Well, I think what Mr. Bush is missing is that the textile industry, if you want, has rationalized itself. It's become more efficient. It's resulted in less jobs in some areas.
Not in Quebec, it hasn't.
But I think it's more competitive. And if you come along with the GATT, which is going to have a 40% tariff reduction overall, which is to the benefit of Canada as a trading nation, I think that you're going to have benefits all over with better imports
You
and
must
a
have
better
been
job
approached a
export.
dozen times by importers here who were going broke because they couldn't bring in shoes from
That's
Europe or from Japan and Taiwan and whatnot.
And their quotas were cut, and they were in a terrible state. I mean, they were doomed to go bankrupt unless something has changed in this policy.
And will you change that?
Yes, because we recognize that it's not only the manufacturers that provide jobs, it's the retailers too, and the jobbers and so on.
But that might hit the industry in Quebec and
Well,
Ontario. Don't forget Ontario. Don't let's
right.
concentrate in Quebec.
I concede that there's a very fine balance, and on the one hand, you can't import everything into Canada and destroy all the jobs, even if it's cheaper, but you can't just gouge the consumer by your import policies either.
The man is waving at me. Put up the phones. I want the people in Quadra, Vancouver, to get at these candidates. Clarke, see what they think of him. Manning, see what they think of him. And the Reverend?
Well, I don't really style myself.
Alan
anymore.
Bush, NDP,
Alan Bush.
after the break. You're going to go to the telephones, gentlemen, and if you'll look at the appropriate camera if you're responding to the caller. That one, that one. Where's the other one? Oh, it's there. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I'd like to speak to the Liberal candidate. I don't think he knows the facts about Quebec. I was living there during the Bourassa time, and what happened there was Mr. Bourassa, with the blessing of Mr. Trudeau, passed the language law, which made French the only official language of Quebec. That meant you had to have your birth certificates, your marriage, everything in French would be legal. If you had an English copy, it would not be counted. Also, there was
Okay,
a lot of...
now...
A second, yeah. Ma'am, I was in Ottawa at that time, and if the Prime Minister walked into Quebec and called Bourassa stupid, said the legislation was stupid, we funded a challenge in the provincial courts. It's provincial legislation, and in no way has the Prime Minister supported the unilingualism, if you want, of Quebec, and it's all part of the constitutional proposals, if you want, that the English in Quebec have the right to speak and be educated in their language the same as the French outside of Quebec, and that's part and parcel of the policy.
What do you have to say to that? Would you agree with Paul?
Well, the question was directed to Paul.
No, bilingualism.
Well,
I mean, one real shaft that, what's his name, Stanfield, threw at Trudeau yesterday was he said, I lost my faith in the integrity of Trudeau when he attracted Horner to his cabinet, knowing that Horner was totally opposed to him on bilingualism policy, or what's that effect, saying that Trudeau was a cold-blooded this and that. At least I put the words in his mouth, you know. But bilingual, you know that there's always been a nub of very stubborn Tories who just don't want any part of bilingualism. Are you one of them?
No, I'm not one of them, Jack. I know there were something like 15 Conservatives that voted against the bilingual resolution, but the party supported it. But Trudeau didn't carry it out the way he promised in the wording of the resolution, and that's what's got people out here upset. Nobody in Canada would mind if it was simply a matter that any Canadian could speak to his government in the language of his choice.
That's the Official Languages Act.
That's right. And that's what we supported. But we don't support the lengths to which it's been carried, such as having 60-year-old civil servants learn French and then ship them out to Vancouver where they never speak French. And all the bilingual cornflakes boxes and all those things that we've
well, with exception, bilingual cornflakes boxes have been in this country since 1939. The second part of it is one of the problems when you came in and tried to bilingualize a government that wasn't before, and you were unable to come into provinces like British Columbia, even with federal help, and put more second language training into the schools until just recently, then you were left with trying to educate public servants, which was unfortunate and very difficult.
Badly done.
Badly done.
A lot of money wasted.
Well, there was a sense of urgency towards the late 60s, which I think resulted in some ham-handed procedures, if you want. But the policy is sound if it's applied properly.
On paper, it looks great, but it seems to have caused more trouble. However, how about you, Alan Bush?
Well, I think the biggest problem that we have with this is the fact that under our Constitution, the BNA Act, every person in Canada, whether they're French or English, has a right to be tried in their own language if they run into difficulty with the law. And it's true in Quebec that...
Same BNA Act as we know about?
Yes.
Or you got a different one?
No, that's the BNA Act. You have a right to be heard in your own language in the courts. And in Quebec, if you're English, and I grew up in Quebec, je parle français un peu, mais un petit peu. And in Quebec, if you're English, you can be heard in the courts, and you can be heard by a jury of English-speaking Frenchmen usually. But in the rest of the country, the French people do not have this kind of right, and I think that's a disgrace.
Jack, I think one of the issues of this, and I know that there's some resentment out here in BC, but I think at issue in this thing is are Quebecers going to have the equality they were promised when they came into this country, when we all came in together? And there's been an imbalance. I think it's getting closer to being there, but that's what's going to turn this referendum one way or another, whether Quebecers feel that they have the equality that we do, and on the other hand, do Westerners feel they have a place in the country that they deserve?
It's only Alberta that really doesn't have a place in the country, isn't it, though?
Of course, we have to ask at this point what Quebec is doing to make Westerners feel at home when they go down to Quebec.
And are they not?
You
can't send your children to school.
Well,
if you move to Quebec at the moment, you cannot put your English-speaking child into an English-speaking school. Am I correct?
That's
the problems that we've got, and that's the problems we're trying to fight.
But you can listen to English television in Rimouski.
Yes,
Is that
you
good?
can.
Yes, you
You can
can.
listen to French television in Vancouver.
That's right.
Nobody's complaining about it now.
Not now.
As a matter of fact, I watch the Canadians in French, and I find that my hockey French is magnifique.
Oh, c'est bon.
Yeah. 5 minutes, 20 secondes. Le fleur.
Numero 10.
Go ahead, please. From Duncan.
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, I got a comment to make, Jack, and then I have a question to ask at the same time. Talking to a lot of conservatives, they say that they don't feel that Joe Clarke is very strong, and the people that I'm talking to are going to vote against him, the conservative, to get rid of Joe Clarke. I'd like to ask your Mr. Clarke in the studio whether he feels that if Mr. Clarke loses this election, you're finally going to get sense in the Conservative Party and elect somebody like Claude Wagner, the leader, and they'd probably have no trouble.
Okay, good question. Bill Clarke, no relation, same party.
Yeah, different spelling.
Different spelling.
Any party that didn't allow its leader to fight an election, or even two, would be laughed off the ballot. But let me tell you, I've worked with Joe Clarke for the last 7 years, and I'm extremely impressed with that man. I've seen him bring our caucus together. I've seen him lead the caucus in a way that even Bob Stanfield didn't. And Bob Stanfield was on with you this week, Jack. He's one of the highest in praise for Joe Clarke. And I loved Bob Stanfield because I entered politics under his tutelage. But I know that Bob was very interested in keeping the options open in caucus, and he never really gave the caucus the leadership that it now has. And after all, if you look at the experience, you can add up, Joe Clarke's been in the House of Commons for 7 years plus now, and that's more than twice as long as Pierre Trudeau had been in when he became Prime Minister.
The only thing is, the question that I would have is we never heard a word of Joe Clarke before Joe Clarke became the leader of the Conservative Party, and I think right now in the times that you're talking about Quebec, you're going to need a very strong leader, and I think a person like Claude Wagner would have his hand on
Bringing up Claude Wagner. Yeah. What about Brian Mulroney? What about John
Claude
Tender?
Wagner came second, but it's a good thing we didn't get Claude because he's ill, and then went to the Senate. So
I'll answer his basic question. If Clarke is badly beaten, he's finished. If Trudeau's badly beaten, he's finished. We'll be back after this break. Bill Clarke, Vancouver-Quadra. Alan Bush, Tory, NDP, and Paul Manning, the Lib. Do you live in Quadra?
Yes.
Do you live in Quadra?
Yes.
Do you live in Quadra?
Not anymore, Jack.
Where do you live? Rimouski?
No, Vancouver South.
Vancouver South. It was you that mentioned Rimouski. Go ahead, please.
Directed to Mr. Manning.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I opened the Courier, and I find an advertisement here by the Canadian Intelligence Service outlining Mr. Elliott Trudeau's background since, excuse me, 1940. Now, how can you sit there and back a man with a background like that and tell me he's going to be good for Canada if this advertisement is true?
Well, I suggest you read the advertisement slowly and look at some of the language that's used in it. Trudeau was a world traveler. The fact that he got to know Mao helped us get introduced, if you want, into China and recognize China before the United States. The fact that he met Julius Nyerere gave us some entree into Tanzania, which has helped in Africa. But I don't think that you judge the man by his performance in office, not by some right-wing propaganda that I don't know how it finds its way into a responsible newspaper in an election campaign.
Okay, but to be quite fair, I would go ahead with Manning that the Canadian Intelligence Service is a highly irresponsible organization. Some of the facts are correct, and some of the facts annoy me as much as they might annoy you, but I do not accept the broad tar brush which they use. Would you agree with that too, I think? We would all agree with that.
Yes,
there was some literature that came out, I remember, in the 68
definitely.
election by Strang, who was a John Bircher, and if there's one thing I think Canadians have, it's a sense of fairness and common sense, and most people, I think, sir, will take that Canadian intelligence ad and wrap a piece of fish in it that's dead and throw it away.
But Paul Manning's not supporting Pierre Trudeau anyway. He's running against his leader, and you can see
On what? On what?
Well, no, on all sorts of things. He says, vote for me now because in 2 years after the referendum, Trudeau's going to be gone and we'll get you a new leader. Now, what kind of a what kind
You know,
of
this
policy
is
is that?
I love the Tories. No, this is.
That's what he said. It's right there in that sheet you got on
This
your
is-
desk, Jack.
Which
Read that
sheet?
blue one. That blue
Right
one.
here.
The blue one.
Sure,
This is-
it's from the Ottawa Citizen.
Remember, this is our old friend Ian Hunter, who came out here and we had lunch, and he omitted a number of things from an interview in which he didn't take notes.
Right. Here.
I also, in the same story, you might notice there's a Tory, a long-time Tory in the writing, and I related this
Who, your
story to Ian
father?
Hunter. No.
Oh, he was a long-time Tory in the writing too, you know.
Who was?
His father. Yeah.
Yes, well, he's switched like a lot of other Tories, but we've got some Tories in the riding that have problems with Trudeau, and one of them told me they're going to phone east at 7:30, which will be 10:30 Eastern time, and if Trudeau's losing, they'll vote for me in Quadra because I'm better than Bill Clarke, and they know it. But what I've tried to say throughout this campaign is compare the leaders. Look at what we've got ahead of us, and obviously, by any comparison, Pierre Trudeau is the best man for the job now, and I think we saw that on the debate.
Paul, I think you're saying something opposite of what you said earlier in the program. You said that you thought this whole leadership struggle was really quite wrong. We ought to be looking at parties and party policy, and I would have to agree with that.
It was raised by my friend here, Mr. Clarke.
You agreed with
I've
him
gone
that,
straight
that
down
the
the line with
leadership
the
struggle
Prime
was
Minister.
not really the issue, that the issue was policy.
But Paul, you don't agree with your Prime Minister on mortgage interest deductibility.
Well, you didn't
How
agree.
many
You
other
didn't
things?
agree with your party policy when it came out either.
That's not right. I was against the idea before my party studied the issue and decided to adopt the policy. And I was part of the task force that went to Washington, an all-party task force, and studied the results of
Let me
their
get
policy
this clear,
down there.
if I may. It's sometimes different with politicians. You were against mortgage deductibility.
I proposed it during my nomination.
As a Liberal.
As a
you
Liberal.
proposed it.
And I fought for the idea of mortgage deductibility as a Liberal, as party policy.
And it's been
And
rejected by your party.
Jean Chrétien said we've got to make up our minds. Either we're going to reduce the deficit or we're going to spend
Let
more
me get
money.
this quite clear. This is most important. You proposed mortgage
I proposed mortgage
deductibility.
deductibility.
Your party rejected it, and you are now against it.
No, I'm not. I remain in favor.
You were against mortgage deductibility. Your party accepted it, and now you're for it.
That's right. But
At
it's
least
not
he's
quite
clear
as simple
of
as that.
Mind you.
Jack, if I may interject.
Please.
He's
I
against
think,
mortgage
I think this is the
deductibility.
reason that I joined the NDP a long time ago, is
They don't
that
know
we
where
have a
they are.
party with a very clear policy. We don't get too involved in personality struggles, and the policy that we have is espoused by all candidates equally. And at least I know what it is. I've had a very hard time trying to find out what the policies of these two people are. It's basically the same policy, and they're basically going in the same direction, and I don't think Canada can afford to go in that direction very much longer.
Do you agree with your leaders' commercials written by your slick ad agency in Tirana, which say, if Broadbent were the leader of the Liberal or the Conservative parties, he'd be Prime Minister tomorrow?
The only thing I can say, Jack, is nobody's perfect.
That's a dreadful thing, isn't it? Now, let's have another little spat, please.
All right, on what?
Oh, you two are obviously in a fighting mood this morning.
Sure, on cue. What would you like?
I won't go back to this one, but you did say that Trudeau's only going to be there for a couple of years, didn't you? Until after the Quebec referendum.
Ian Hunter, who wrote this story, and I talked, and I said the Prime Minister has been involved in politics for 11 years. He's not staying because he likes to meet kings and prime ministers. He's in there because he has a commitment and a passion to erase or to beat separatism once and for all in Quebec.
You wouldn't mind a little personal criticism of your party from me.
Jack, I wouldn't expect anything less.
Where has this dynamic, vigorous, fighting Trudeau, full of leadership, been for the last 11 years? He's magnificent on these commercials. Even his free time on the other night, he was on rare form. Is he going to be like this for 3 weeks or 3 years?
Well, it's
Oh, 3 years?
Just 1
or 3
week, Jack. 1 week.
See the point I'm making?
Five more days.
Now, let's not get into Joe. Although I'll concede he's not half as bad as some of these people say he is. At least he's got a team. What happened to Pierre's team?
Pierre's team is all around, whether it be Art Phillips in centre, or Gordon Gibson on the North Shore, or Richard Bullock, or the
Or
people
John
that are
Turner.
already there.
You didn't mention Sima Holt.
Sim will be there. They're
Or
already
John
there.
Turner, or Donald MacDonald,
Listen, if
or
there's-
Ron
if
Basford,
there's one
or
thing-
Pelchier, or
Do you want to go,
There's
do you want to
32
go
of them,
through
I
that?
think, Jack. The
Ron
Trudeau-
Basford's been in politics for 14 years and 2 young children and decides to retire. You don't go around and say he's got no confidence in Trudeau. He'd step in front of a cannon. for him.
Gentlemen, you have 10 seconds each. Bill Clarke,
Well, why doesn't Trudeau resign then? He's got 3 young children at home.
Alan Bush.
The Liberals say what we need is a strong leader. A leader must be leader. The only problem is where is he leading us?
You're kidding us.
And
about
the other
that.
side, of course, from the Conservative side, is they seem to be going around in circles.
10 seconds.
You give Quadra the best MP you can get, and I think that's me.
Manning the Liberal, Bush the NDP, and Clarke the Tory. Webster after this break. Merci, monsieur. Just a minute till I finish. Stay there. Grab it, you come with me. Which grab it is she? Is that Steve? Oh, yeah, he looks like a boy. He does. This girl looks like a girl, no, she's a married.
You got 30 seconds to wrap, Jack. 30 seconds, that's all.
Oh, yeah, we don't social credit dentist in Hawaii.